I work in the identity space. I've been involved with identity networks for the last 3-4 years. I've been keenly following Aadhaar and the blockchain both. So this is an impromptu moderation, so please, let's just go with that and let's see how it goes. So let's just start with the fresh introductions from everybody. If you can introduce to the audience why and how you're in the identity space and what's your background and what you've been doing, and just a little bit so that we can put context to the conversation.
So I used to head Qualcomm for almost a decade, and now I'm an advisor to officers and a few companies in the blockchain space. While I do also have my own startups in the AI, AR, and IoT mobile space. So the interesting point is, Vishal, and you want to start the discussion or you want to just do an intro?
Let's just do first intros and then
okay. Okay. Then
Sure. So my name is Clea Young, and I'm here in India studying Aadhaar on a fellowship from New America. And my expertise is in digital identity, and specifically how we empower individuals to own and control their own digital identity. That's what I've been working on for the last 15 years.
Great. Yes, please.
Okay, I am Saurabh Katia. I am program head for NIIT Technologies based in Thailand. So I'm there almost now 15 years. So what I'm going to talk about, how Aadhaar is new to me also. Maybe you know better than me, but I'll tell you that how other countries are doing, like in Thailand, maybe help the government or governments to adapt to some part of it. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Ashutosh. I run a fintech company called Insigni. I've been working a lot with the government for taxations and Aadhaar in general. So I thought this would be a good session to include blockchain in the mix as well.
Great. So okay, so let's just start. Let's just name the elephant in the room. I like to put it that way. Like, let's start with the big problem. I mean, I hope we are all aware that Supreme Court has recently banned Aadhaar in terms of fintech use, and there was some thought process going behind Supreme Court. Let's just kind of make aware why do you think Supreme Court, what is the reasoning do you think Supreme Court has kind of said, let's not have private institutions use Aadhaar authentication? I mean, it's a big problem, right? So I think Kalia would probably be the ideal person to answer this one, but I think everybody can take a go at that.
So the reasoning, they wrote a 1,500-word judgment, or 1,500-page judgment, so it's really long. But one of the key things that's missing in India is privacy legislation that protects how all institutions, governments and the private sector, use personal data. So in the absence of sort of a legal framework in which people are sharing a lot of personal information with their institutions, maybe it's not good to let those institutions use that data. So that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, so what in fact, what I followed the news, I will admit that there was some recognition against Aadhaar.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody hear him? So,
is it okay? So what I heard that Supreme Court said that the information like biometric and other things are not being, like, it's very secure and it's not circulated. And there was some violation on data side, and which they have a concern, still have a concern right now. So I think there are a lot of initiatives which from the government side to ensure that further. But there is still a reluctance to have a public-private partnership or a kind of having a distributed leisure kind of model to adapt to institutionship or kind of project.
I cannot understand. Is everybody able to hear the mic?
No, there's quite disturbance there.
So that mic is probably.
Okay. So what I was saying that, like what I have followed the news in the last 6 months, that certainly there was a violation on data privacy about Aadhaar, and there was a writ petition for the against the Aadhaar in Supreme Court, and a decision which was taken that Supreme Court said that there is no violation altogether because the biometric and other secure information is not being circulated, it's still very protected. And but what we are seeing in here, like there is a concern in the, right now with the government on cybersecurity and other laws at the moment, and the way the infrastructure is set up at the moment. There are a lot of actually requirement to improve that area, and a reluctance is there for the public-private partnership and a distributed ledger kind of model at the moment for e-citizenship. That was a point which I was trying to make.
That's in Thailand, or is it? This model is running in Thailand, or?
No, I'm talking about
here.
Since you are talking about here.
Okay.
But at the same time, when I talk about Thailand, what we have seen in as a country, it has evolved very consciously, from Thailand 1.2, 2.2, 3.2, and 4.2. These are all the digital vision things which they are adapting. And I've seen the countries like Sweden and others, they already are quite mature in terms of digital transformation, right from the smart city projects to e-citizenship platforms. Thailand right now has matured to 4.0, what they call it. And that's where actually e-governance model they want to adapt towards, starting from the healthcare. That's one big project they are coming in right now. And the second one is in terms of e-KYC, what they call it, every authentication has to be done through the digital ID or something. So these two are the projects which are there, and then subsequently, in fact, in the previous session which we were listening about, how connected to the agriculture, farmers, putting up a kind of auction platform for the farmers with the blockchain and other things in place. So these are the things which are directly, in fact, connecting to the citizens. One thing which I see a difference altogether in here, countries like Thailand, Singapore, they're quite mature. The citizens are quite mature, 95% literacy in terms of using the mobile apps or the digital literacy. But as a country, as in India, is quite a big so adaptability and how, what shall be the roadmap will be totally different when we talk about these kind of things. So which actually are already being experienced, use cases are there, but how to adapt to that will need some introspection and insight to start with.
So see, government normally needs the identity system for it to serve its citizens. The government's job is to be for the citizens, not. I think the core problem here is that the Aadhaar enables mass surveillance when the government enables private companies to start accepting authentications from a central register. The government can track everything in the economy, right? And once so we already have certain background, there's a certain background doubt which always remains in the government side. Is CBI being used for illegal purposes? Are the politicians really using it to their advantage? Now imagine, think of it this way. Imagine if there was a person who was following you all day long, wherever you go, even whatever you do inside your house, they would watch it. That is what happens on internet every day right now. And the question is, do we want to create a central register where everything is getting tracked? And what are your views? So, I mean, is it something, where do you draw this balance, where the e-governance they should have access to identities or they should not? A private company should be allowed or not? I mean, the government is allowed. In the Supreme Court ruling, the government is allowed to use Aadhaar for whatever services they need to deliver to the citizens. The question is, should they be tracking the private companies, and the private companies should be using this identity system? Right?
I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it. Like coming from the telecom background, what I looked at is that if you look at all the example that you gave is all arising because of the multiple apps
or the activity that the user does on the mobile, which exposes his bedroom, actually. Okay, so how do you avoid that situation, and what are the control rules there? So I think the time has come that there could be a system based on blockchain, which is driving self-sovereign kind of identity highway, which drives this whole login process on the mobile, which along with the social media logins that you have today. And that identity then takes you, connects to all the apps and services that is there on the platform, which binds certain access, or at least you are informed how your identity is being used. Pretty much what GDPR is trying to do to some extent in Europe, and how quickly we bring in that discipline to India. Because it's very important that users understand how they are being used, or their activity or identity is being used by multiple apps that we involuntarily sign up to without even knowing the implications around it. So, and then of course the discussion around the entire telecom space, whether you're exposing your IoT ecosystem and your home ecosystem, which are all again connected to your mobile ecosystem, and how do you kind of address that piece of the whole dynamics.
So great. So fortunately we are very blessed to have Kalia here today. Okay, you want to add your views to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that taking a step back, right, when it comes to Aadhaar, Aadhaar is just meant to be a bio database. It's a biometric database. It shouldn't be anything more than that. There's no tracking, there's nothing involved in that, right? How people access Aadhaar is what is causing the problem. I mean, there should have been a layer in between, which is like a privacy layer, as Kali was saying earlier, where, any company, whether it's a bank or a telecom who wants to access, right? So they do the fingerprint digitization, and then, they check, verify, they get the information. That's it, it's done. They don't store any information, they don't get to see any information. It's just a okay or a yes message. Instead of that, what we got was a 10-digit number, which is what, like Aadhaar is a 10-digit number, right? So nobody thinks of Aadhaar as a biometric database anymore. They think of it more as a 10-digit number, which is what the problem is, right? You go to a bank now, you have to write that number instead of, putting your fingerprint and your iris number. So the whole philosophy behind why Aadhaar was set up is kind of lost.
For the private companies, for the government is using that biometric database.
Sure, and in some instances, Geo also used it, right? So when they started with this in verification, they were using it. But at the same time, the entire information was coming on their piece. So there's nothing stopping them from not recording and saving that information. So I don't know if there is.
The problem is, let's say tomorrow, if we get some wrong Prime Minister, and he directs the Aadhaar agency to start recording it today.
Wrong Prime Minister.
So within 1 year, you would have tracked everything across the country.
Which is what the problem is. Technically, Aadhaar is just a biometric database. There shouldn't be any tracking allowed, because, right now we are storing every piece of information that goes to that. But in a sense, all it should be is that a yes and no decision whether your KYC works or not. Right?
But what happens when you get a yes-no decision from the database is that it's recording where that yes-no decision was initiated from, and that information, all those thumbprint readers have specific unique identifiers, and the government can know where they're from.
Exactly. So that additional separation privacy layer is missing.
Yeah.
So let me quantify the problem a little more. Okay. So identity systems, I'm not saying that it's been solved anywhere else in the world beautifully. I think Aadhaar is one of the most beautiful pieces of technology we've seen so far. At least this is what my views are. Theoretically. So there are 4 problems. One is, let me explain the identity problems. One is proofing problem. That is this name, date of birth, and thumbprint as a valid, is it a valid combination? That's a proofing problem. The second problem is binding problem, where is this identity really bound to this person? So that's why you have this authentication system. So if you solve these two, which Aadhaar has kind of solved both these two problems, the third problem which emerges is the central tracking. So when you're authenticating the thumbprint, it pings a central database where it tells you if this entry is correct or not. So that's the central authentication problem. And the fourth problem is external correlation problem. So is this number, when you start using this number everywhere, all these companies start buying data from each other and they build your own profile, which is outside your control. And sometimes it might have some wrong data about you, and you cannot fix it. So these are these 4 problems. So now, how does blockchain really fit in, and is this the only solution? So I think this is more like we have the tech guru or genius here, Kalia. Can you just give us a light of what is happening in blockchain in this space? And why blockchain is the only answer to Aadhaar, probably.
You're so dramatic, Vishal. So one of the ways that blockchain can help is to support individuals owning and controlling their identifiers. It doesn't change this dynamic where states issue identification documents to citizens, but it puts those documents in digital form in a person's digital wallet, and then lets them present them just like we have cards in our physical wallet today. When we use them at various services, those physical documents don't phone home and say, hey, I just got used to go into a bar, government. Like, they don't do that because they're paper. So we need digital documents that are as believable or even more believable than paper, but have the properties like paper where they don't phone home. And you get to use the blockchain for that, where you compose the digital verifiable credentials and you issue them to people, and you can check the signatures that sign them by the issuing authority and know they haven't been altered or changed. And so that's how self-sovereign or decentralized identity works, where you can still have your credentials or the documents issued to you today in paper form and avoid the kind of phone home problems that Vishal was talking about.
So it's kind of like you're authenticating against the blockchain instead of actually the central authority. So that's where the crux is.
Your digital identity gets created by your biometric on the blockchain, and then you use blockchain.
No biometrics.
No biometrics at all?
Okay, the biometrics probably is...
You could like you could store your own biometrics in your own personal cloud and authenticate against yourself.
Yeah, that's
but as soon as you have them in a giant database.
So they are encrypted under your control, like your documents. And just that you have one public key or multiple public keys to represent yourself on the blockchain. So I think that kind of solves it. So now we have the Supreme Court ruling, which is kind of causing a huge pain in the private sector. I think Ashutosh would be dealing the most with this pain, is it? Because you're like running a fintech. So tell us what is the pain point, what's happening right now, and how you...
the biggest pain point is the KYC, right? Aadhaar was supposed to solve the KYC problem, and now you're running a fintech, somebody comes to you for a loan request, or you do the KYC, and the entire KYC is kind of gone. So you have to look for other ways to do the same thing that you were trying to do earlier with Aadhaar.
So what are the ways you are using right now as a backup?
Bank statements is one, and then we collect other information like PAN card and stuff, and then we verify against that. Because of IT department's requirement to still use PAN card, it's still verifiable.
PAN card is still verifiable?
PAN.
Somebody should try to school program.
It happens.
I think that's also central authentication. It's kind of tracking everybody if you're verifying against
So civil also tracks everyone, right? So if you open a civil report, you'll get your addresses every time you've taken a loan, every time you've done something. So tracking is everywhere. You can't avoid it.
So, but tell me something. If you have regulator, and Civil I think is a private company, right?
TransUnion enabled.
TransUnion, so a foreign company owns Civil, and we let them allow tracking in our India. And so, is this a better way of doing it? Because otherwise, if regulators start doing the job themselves, who will regulate the regulators?
That's the guidance.
So isn't it better that the private companies do this job and regulators kind of keep a watch? Yeah, I think we should have everybody's views on this one.
So certainly we have to take use case by use case, right? So there is no one thumb answer for all the problems. So as I mentioned, what success I have seen in the last 3 years in talent, So they started with this KYC thing. Like Bank of Thailand has issued a guideline to all the banks and insurance companies that next 2 years you have to complete the eKYC, which includes the face recognition and the complete data on the chip. So that is there, and then that information is being controlled and managed by the user, by the person directly, if I'm an account holder. So I can have that information like the insurance company, I have a policy, or I have a in fact bank account or something, and the same thing actually can be leveraged for other purposes as well. So this is already started. Second thing is that now about the for the healthcare records. So that is certainly is a very popular use case which is already successfully running. Where my health problem, if I have a series of problems which includes the heart or something, and I've undergone a surgery and I have a pacemaker, and then I have regular monitoring of the heart, and I have some device installed. So all the data can be tracked and monitored at the moment, and I will authenticate with my public key to the doctor or the hospital to use that. So all those things are already in place to do that. And the third thing, as an expat, because I have a national ID right now, but I don't have to carry physical visa or something or work permit. I have an e-visa, I have a mobile app. I don't have to carry physical paper anymore. So and that is one of the big things which is happening at the moment.
Let me ask you, now that all this is e-governance inside Thailand, so don't you think Thailand has the maximum hoops and they kind of track everybody and they can change the government whenever they want to? Isn't that true about Thailand?
I have a colleague in the self-sovereign identity space who's based in Thailand, and he said that the Thai government started issuing e-driver's licenses, and like the next day the police said, we don't accept these, so they just became like...
Okay, so these initial brushes happens, but things take time to adapt. So see, that country is as big as New Delhi, in terms of geography, in terms of number of people, it's easy to manage, it's still easy to manage with these benches. But as a country, as in India, the strategy has to be totally different. So, and execution level is a big problem.
So we'll come to execute. See, we'll execute it once we agree on the end goal, right? So we'll work it backwards how to execute it.
One thing which I want to add, all these things, because the participation of government, the will of the government is one of the key things. It all starts from that desk. And rest is closed down in terms of execution.
See, government is designed to serve us citizens. We designed the government, right? And their job is to serve us. We don't want it to become such a beast which it has its life of its own and we can't take control of it back. If I may say there's some countries where the government is far more powerful than the citizens and they just some citizens disappear. We don't want that situation, right? So we want the government to be less powerful, but serving more than what the power it has. So the question is, we don't want any wrong person to take control of the situation and then forever it goes out of control and we have to bomb that country to get it back. So
anyway, that's one thing, but I think one thing which is there, as a technology, blockchain certainly offers a lot of, it's more democratic, it's more citizen friendly, it's bringing more control to the people. So as a technology, I will say these things are there, but how to adapt to it is a big question. So that's a question which is there to talk about.
So let me, I've been to one of Kalya's conference in San Francisco. I met some of the best inventors. I met the inventor of email, inventor of first virtual worlds, the first news feeds. All kinds of people were under one roof. They were thinking about this problem. And I think there's a verifiable credentials architecture which is just being proposed, and there's a meeting actually next week in what is it? Barcelona, yes. So they've proposed a standard based on blockchain, which actually gives the people the power to prove their own identity, and they can actually take these credentials from the government and keep it to themselves forever, and they can verify it using that by the power of blockchain. So don't you think that kind of solves the emphasis? You're kind of representing almost like one of the best institutional frameworks of India. So what are your thoughts on that?
Certainly, the vision certainly lies to take to that level, but I think it's a bit premature to talk about because, like similarly, like the real people doesn't live in metros. Real people are far, in the rural areas or maybe the tribal areas. So they are actually the real people of a nation, which forms a nation. And I think when we think of a technology adaptation, we have to think from the grassroots level.
From the grassroots.
I think there's an inherent tension in these new visionary tools that require a lot of digital literacy, trust in the software on your phone, the ability that you even have a smartphone is sort of assumed in a lot of these technologies. On the other hand, some folks are looking at pretty marginalized populations, like the massive migration of folks from Syria and other places into Europe. The one thing those folks are carrying with them is the smartphone. And they keep it, and it has everything in their life on it. And they, it's this possession. So it's like, I think there's an opportunity to support people who are, migrating around with just their smartphone as their one possession they're sure not to lose. And other folks who, as you say, are in these very rural places that we need to think about how these tools work for them. One of the people I've met here in India is Dr. Subhashish Banerjee at IIT Delhi, and he actually was looking at how do you create an Aadhaar card with a photo embedded in a QR code that's signed by the authorities so that you can basically use that as an offline authentication if you can read the QR code and check the signature and look at the person and go, yeah, that's that person. So how do we think creatively about, giving people digital identities that also work in analog ways offline until they migrate into the digital world?
Right, yeah, imagine if you don't even know how to write your name and you have to prove your name, you just do a thumb. How innovative is that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, India's built a really innovative solution for itself, but I think it has to think into the future. Like, what does the end result of those systems look like in 30 years? And do you want that system to exist? Or do you have to think about how, as people become more digitally literate, they're more empowered to own their own data, to not have the government be seeing everything, It's an evolution.
I think Aadhaar is one of the most beautiful technologies to come out of India. I think it's the next generation India's Taj Mahal to the world. I'm kind of overdoing it, but I think it's one of the most innovative technologies I've seen. However, there was a fork in the road. We could go the China way, which is like, let's kind of make sure we're watching everybody. Let's watch every camera and we'll pick up the people who are not behaving well. Or you could go the European way, which is the GDPR way, where every individual is empowered and has a right, and the government is there to serve. So I think that's the kind of road we've chosen, and obviously technology will have to kind of solve for whatever problems come on the way. So let's just open these questions to the audience. You can quiz all of us. And, yeah, okay, we have one question. Do we have mics here? Can somebody give a mic? Or maybe you can stand up and, just say your name and a small introduction and then...
Yeah, my name is Dinkar Kalra. I'm an advocate. I was actually involved with the Aadhaar case. I was one of the interveners. So one of the primary concerns that was raised before the court was that once this data is given to the companies, there is no partition here. There is no specific difference in between what they need to verify my identity qua their needs and what all data do I have on myself. It is not a push kind of a system where I only provide them the data that they need. It was a pull system. Once I give them my 10-digit number, they can pull out every aspect of my life. And that was what was completely unacceptable to the court. Secondly, the court said that you have put in a clause which allows me, the government, to intervene or to look into your data without a court order in cases of national security. That the court struck down.
Right.
Now, my basic problem with Aadhaar being on the blockchain, now I'm not anti-Aadhaar or anti-blockchain, but the problem is that blockchain by its very nature is immutable. Once you get any person, literate, illiterate, may not know the difference between having their data on the blockchain and recognizing that this is an inescapable part of life now, that this is never going to go away, that I will never be able to alter this. Once you put something like Aadhaar on the blockchain, how do you take care of somebody's privacy? How do you ensure that it does not get misused?
So I'll answer that question. So a lot of there's a misunderstanding with the decentralized identifier standard and the verifiable credential standard that personal information shows up on the chain. The thing that's showing up on the chain are the public keys of the issuing authorities. So the government, if the government of India, or like in British Columbia, we'll use them because they're doing this, the government of British Columbia is issuing verifiable credentials to its businesses and citizens. It's posting to a ledger the public key it used to sign those credentials. And then it hands the credentials over to the citizen. The citizen then takes the credential and presents it to another business or service. That business or service goes and checks the ledger to see the signature that the province of British Columbia matches the one on the credential they are receiving. But all those transactions with the PII are all happening privately between different business entities. They're never happening in public, and you never see the actual data on a ledger.
So what you're talking about is a partition between parties, as I understand it, in the blockchain existing. That did not exist in terms of Aadhaar as it existed prior to the Supreme Court judgment.
Yeah.
So if that is the way it should be implemented on a blockchain, perhaps the court's concerns may be done away with. However, they had also one more concern was that Aadhaar may be turned into, as Vishal said, a tool of mass surveillance, and we may go the China way. Now that concern, however, will still remain if the government still has unbridled access to it. The government itself. Can there be a stopgap arrangement where the government itself can be controlled?
Yes,
from technologically speaking, not talking about courts and no, just ensuring that the government itself, without my authorization, cannot have access to everything at one go.
Yes. So, see, the government. I'll tell you the situations where the government does need access. So, identity is all about accountability. You know, is this person a criminal? Is he doing something wrong? So, there's a very beautiful system which the world has enabled recently, I mean, the last decade or so, which has gone mainstream, is the AML KYC laws. So what this does is, the banks have been made responsible to make sure that clients are good people, and if something goes wrong, the banks get penalized, unless they report that suspicious transaction to the intelligence unit, which is centralized. So the government only sees the bad transactions, they never see the good transactions. So the banks are supposed to act as the filter to kind of create that partition which you're talking about. But the banks are supposed to make sure that their clients are doing good and they're not dealing with drugs or they're not dealing with human trafficking. So that's the only piece which government sees in a decentralized way. So it's a beautiful decentralized crime detection system on one side. And on the other side, when you are authenticating against the blockchain, the government is not coming in the middle. So they can't see who is accessing that information. So government kind of becomes blind to all the good transactions.
Thank you.
So it kind of solves it. Yes, please.
So,
can we have a mic there? Someone yes, okay. Yes, yeah.
Wait, they just handed him a mic. Okay.
Great, we have one. Awesome.
So, my question is, we are seeing various implementations that are happening around identity.
No, that's
not there.
Not true.
So we are seeing multiple implementations around identity. We got some of the global implementations with the startups like Civic, Uport. Then there are geography-specific identity solutions that are coming up, something what we have discussed around Canada and across different geographies. Now, my question is, when each of this implementation is happening, they are doing based upon the best of their understanding of how identity should be managed. I'm very curious to understand how identity standards are being developed. Are there any organizations that are working in terms of what identity standards should be followed by all these institutions?
So the technical standards, Uport's actually very and apparently Civic now, but Uport's very active in the community. The technical standards are being developed at the W3C in the credentials community group. That's entirely open. Can you actually turn your mic off so that you're not getting the feedback? The credentials community group is entirely public, so any of you could join the mailing list and join the phone calls. And there's a verifiable credentials working group that's doing verifiable credentials. And then in terms of thinking through like what information should go into credentials, the leading work on that is being done in Canada. They just released something called a Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, which is trying to build a framework so that an identity from one province is valid in another province and they can have confidence in those credentials. So they're building, and also that those credentials could be then presented to various private sector institutions and they would be believable. Because Canada, like India, is a federated democracy and it has lots of players that are all issuing their own credentials and they don't want to have to make people get 25 of them when 2 would do. So they're working on this Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. And you can look at my blog, identitywoman.net, to go learn more about all these initiatives, and I'm happy to answer anyone's questions offline.
Guys, we are really blessed to have the world's identity woman on our panel today. It's our lucky day, actually. So to add to your questions, I think she's been very, very humble about these groups. I think one of the groups was created by her. It's called Internet Identity Workshop, and there's another group called Reboot Web of Trust. These are international groups where anybody can come and join. If you're in the identity space at all, please join that group. It's very welcoming. They're really nice people, and it's great fun, and you'll be really making some really, really good friends, intellectual friends, who are trying to solve these world problems everywhere.
Is it a Telegram group or LinkedIn group?
No, so they normally meet twice a year, and otherwise you can give your inputs. Like for example, there's a meeting happening in Barcelona next week. You could write a paper and publish your paper inside that group, and they would be happy to review it. And other people would join and review that audit and put their names across as well to support your thoughts. So it's a very welcoming group, and it's a very educated group. And really great work done. We must thank her actually for creating such groups actually. Thank you. Any other questions?
We'll take just one more question from ma'am here, and I think the rest of the question, I'm really sorry sir, we'll take the rest.
Okay, yes sir, we'll take another yes no.
How many questions?
Very good, like interactive session, so let it be continued.
Alright sir.
Alright, so we have time. So if like audience want to put the question, please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Awesome. Yes, good. Thank you.
Yeah, so my question about data, user identification. Let's say, consider a scenario when the user, let's say Vijay Mamana, okay, and his identification is in question on certain transactions. Now you said the government has banned the Aadhaar linkage with the financial transactions. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. So in such scenarios, let's say the government or the court or the lawyers, what is that data which, let's assume, a blockchain is holding? Who should be the stakeholder owning that data about the financial transaction? B, who should be owning the user data about whatever, not only this financial transaction, but whatever past history or who he is, what he's indulged into? Should the use case be for, let's say, if you talk about India as a geography or the country? Or should RBI be holding this data and say, okay, the government needs to write to me, I'll give them access to this data and they'll have it. Or users say, no, I will first allow, and he's in question by the way. His integrity is in question and he's in court right now. So what should this scenario be handled? And that's what I would want to understand.
Should I answer? So I think, I think the most important job is to empower people. And when you grow as a person from, you will make mistakes. And I think it's very important. I think the right to be forgotten is a very important right. And if you put any data on blockchain, which can be seen by everybody, kind of takes away that right. And you're kind of shaming that person forever. So I think people should own their own data, and they should be, and nobody should have access to that data unless there's a court ruling and he's being asked to surrender that data. So this data has to be encrypted by the self-sovereign wallet, the private key, and it should be only with that person. There should not be any transactions which are publicly available on blockchain.
The moment you say he should be asked, then, but he's in question, right? He may have done something wrong and he may not give that password or key to you to access the data. And how does the court take a decision?
So that's a very interesting question, and we have lots of court cases clogged. Our whole court system is clogged. That's another problem we can solve with blockchain probably. So how does that work, Kalia? You know, in US, because I think people cannot. There's a right to not incriminate yourself in US. You know, if the court asks you, you have a right to stay silent, and so you will never hand that. You will never hand over that private key, and so there will be no evidence.
There's going to be lots of interesting court cases in the next 10 years. I have no idea what the answer will be. Okay, let's hear one more question.
Okay, let me just go that route then. Okay. So
let's have another question.
Okay. All right. Yes, please, yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kanesh Gaur. I've been an advisor to Aadhaar as a consultant. So my question is, again, on data privacy and protection. We saw that the Supreme Court identified privacy as a fundamental right for Indian citizens. And then there were a lot of PIIs, PIL filed in the court in terms of how Aadhaar is being authenticated. Do you think it's the right time for India to first come up with its own data protection law? Identify what data protection and privacy means to the citizens of the country, and then look at Aadhaar, because it has a direct implication. So we have a framework which has already been prepared, and you're expecting the data protection bill to be put on, but I think because of election it's not happening. But first and foremost, I've seen, say, from a GDPR journey in EU, the definition of what data protection means, the right for erasure, the right to be forgotten, and consent. These were some fundamentals which actually played a major role in defining the GDPR.
So one thing which I have gone through, that certainly the cyber security and the data protection laws are already in place, but they are getting regularly updated, or new versions are coming up. Certainly, like GDPR is one of the areas which was talked about. What I had known that at Ministry of Information Technology, they have already included that as one of the compliance requirement for, especially for the European, the business or whatever they do for that particular sector. That is already there in place. So, but here, like, the situation is that we are talking about like how blockchain can actually help this particular situation at the moment, where Aadhaar, as a identity that is not secure, people are threatened. That and even now as a protection, it is citizens are not trusting it as a one identity for the nation at the moment, or it's not being considered at the moment. So that is one question which we are now discussing, and this is something which is as I mentioned, like it's an evolving process. Things are in place right now. Technology is in place. We have to start small and grow further. We have to start from a sector which can benefit it immediately. As I mentioned, like in terms of like maybe in the farming sector, directly giving benefit to the farmers, or something which actually, for example, healthcare. Let's start from there and then move forward for other national areas. But as a national identity, e-identity, I think it will take some time to evolve.
Hello. Yes. I think your idea is very good.
Because before you talk about blockchain,
I think your idea is very, very good. So we should probably pick it up as a manifesto subject for this election. That bill needs to be passed for privacy and data protection, what that means. And if you can propose something and open up, probably put up an open letter, that would really help this conversation take forward for the country. We need that in place as a framework for our thoughts to be more meaningful and evolved.
because the definition of privacy varies. I think what privacy means to Indian citizens versus what it means to European, it's completely different. Kalia, just wanted to get your thoughts on this subject.
You know, I'm going to add that to my manifesto internally, which I maintain. In case ever I get into the government, I'll add that thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're totally right. I think, you know, one of the things, I'm writing my paper for my research here, specifically comparing Aadhaar to the U.S. Social Security number system, and in the 1970s, the U.S. government passed the Privacy Act that inhibited the use of the number within the federal government and also articulated how it could be used in the private sector, right? So it's governed by laws, and that, you know, and there's sort of ad hoc privacy legislation in the U.S., but India definitely needs to have a national conversation about what privacy means and put those into law.
You know, there is some woman who had come up to this Bangalore conference of yours, which you had conducted, and she had proposed some beautiful laws, which were actually better than GDPR.
Yeah, she was great.
What was her name?
We'll have to go look those up and post a blog about them. I can't remember.
Great. Okay, so yeah, let's go.
This will be the last question.
Yes.
Okay. So mine is anyways a yes or no majorly. I just want to know, is there any country which has empowered their citizens to take a call on Aadhaar, like you vote? And is there any country, maybe US, maybe Japan, which is technologically pretty advanced, and literacy rate is also really, you know, quite high. So any of the countries which has actually empowered the citizen and they've asked the citizen, it's like a choice whether you want to share the information or not.
So, I mean, one can look at little tiny Estonia of 1.5 million people. So they built a system where every single government database is linked together, and they only ask for information once, and if they have it already, and another agency needs it, they pull it from the other one. But I think it would be pretty scary in this country or any big country that's smaller than a postage stamp to have every government database linked together. So I don't know that you want that to happen.
I think US is empowered. They have a lot of undocumented people. So they have a right not to get documented, I guess. That is a joke. So great. So okay, thank you guys. Really nice to have you guys here, and thank you for creating the conversation. I hope everybody got some value out of it. Thank you. All right.